Alright, so in today's video, we're going to be talking about Chapter 8, the joints. We're going to be talking about the classification of joints, and joints are places where bones articulate together. We're going to be talking about the functional classification of joints. We're also going to be talking about the structural classification of joints. And then we're going to start getting into the 6 structural types of synovial joints. And then lastly, we're going to get into the ranges of motion. Hello, today we're going to be talking about the joints and the 6 synovial joints and the structures of the joints. So first here, as you can see, is the hinge joint. The hinge joint is uniaxial, which means that it only rotates around one axis. And this can be displayed by the locations on your body. Next we have is plane joint. Now this can be shown by the plane joint, it glides across the surface. So it's where the surfaces are flat and it glides across the surface. Now these bones can be found in things like your wrist. Next we have the pivot joint, which is a round head that spins. This joint is also uniaxial, so it only moves around one axis. So this joint can actually be found in things like your head and your neck. You can only spin your head around one axis. Pivot joint. Alright, so next we have is the ball and socket joint. Now this joint is a little different than from all the others because this joint can move in all directions. And this joint is typically found in your shoulder because you can move your shoulder in all types of directions. Next we have is the saddle joint. Now this joint is biaxial. And notice the way that it moves. You can do this movement in places like your thumb. So you can move your thumb in all different directions, just like in the animation shown. This is your saddle joint. And next we have this joint, which is also very similar to the saddle joint. This joint is found in your fingers and it can move in 2 directions. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the angular movements that the joints can do. So the first movement we're going to take a look at is moving from left to right, as displayed here with my wrist. And the next, flexation and extension. Flexation is 90 degrees, extension is 180 degrees. And then hyperextension. Hyperextension is where you move something beyond 180 degrees, as you can see here, where I almost break my finger. And then we have dorsiflexion, and then plantar flexion. Dorsiflexion is your toes up, plantar is your toes down. Now, if you've ever been to the gym, you've used this machine before where you abduct. So, abduct like you're on a UFO about to fly away, and then abduct towards the body. And then we have circumduction, which is going in a circle. And then we have rotation, which is head movement. So you can move your head from left to right. And then we have medial and lateral rotation. So lateral away from the midline and medial towards the midline. And then we have pronation. And then supination, you can remember this by soup. So soup, can I have some soup? Supination. And then we have inversion and exversion, foot inside, foot outside. Then we have protraction, which is to push something forward. And then we have retraction, which is to pull back. Push forward, pull back. And then we have elevation, depression. Elevation, am I gonna pass this class? Depression. Am I gonna pass this class? Maybe, probably so. I don't know, might get a D. It's fine. And then we have opposition, which is opposable thumbs, like being able to use your thumbs. And then lastly, we have lateral flexation. Alright, as you can see, we have this chart right here called Sad Faces. And in this chart, we have different classes. So this right here is the structural class. And the structural class consists of fibrosis joints. The fibrosis joints are made of fibers. And then we have cartilaginous joints. The cartilaginous joints are made of cartilage. And then lastly, we have the synovial joints. The synovial joints are complex and involve a different number of structures, and these are the ones that you can move freely. Now I know some of these words are kind of hard to read, but I'm still going to go over them anyway. So next we have the functional classes. So we have synarthrosis, ambiarthrosis, and diarthrosis. Now notice how these all end in arthrosis. So that's what makes them so easy to remember is synarthrosis, ambiarthrosis, and diarthrosis. And these are the functional classifications of joints. So the functional classification of joints basically means how the joints work. How do they move? What are they able to do? So the synarthrosis joints, these are joints that don't move at all, such as the sutures in your skull. These joints don't move at all, and they're fibrosis. That's why they fall under this section right here. So, again, we have the synarthrosis joints, which are joints that don't move at all. Then we have the ambiarthrosis joints. These joints have limited movement, so they have some movement. And then we have diarthrosis joints, which these joints are freely movable. So as you see what falls under these joints, so for example, synarthrosis is a cartilaginous joint, and it would include things such as the sternum. The sternum, you can't move, and it's made out of cartilage. So that's why it falls under this class and this class. As well as there are also some joints that fall into both classes. This is the syndesmosis and the synchondrosis. Now these fall into both class. And then we also have things that fall under the ambiarthrosis, such as the ulna and radius, and then the ribs and the symphysis. I might not be pronouncing all these words correctly, but I am trying my best. So, you can easily remember all of this by sad faces. And you just have to remember fibrosis, cartilaginous, and synovial. And then synarthrosis, they all end in arthrosis, ambiarthrosis, diarthrosis. Now, if you want to get into the more specifics of things, syndesmosis, these are ligaments. So, things like your tibia and fibula. And then we have the gymphosis. These are what hold your teeth in your socket. And then this says ribs, second through the seventh rib right here in your sternum. These ribs have some movement, limited ampiarthrosis, and they're made out of cartilage. So all your ribs are going to go under the cartilaginous structural class. And when it comes to synovial, you draw two big X's because this synovial means that they're freely movable. So synarthrosis has no movement. So then this wouldn't fall into the class. So when you write the synovial joints, you draw two big X's and then you write right here anything you can move freely.